Welcome to Cover Lover Comics. I'm your host Ray, and this is brought to you by FLAKtv. Find love and kindness. Ladies and gentlemen, speaking of love and kindness, please give us a like and subscribe. FLAKtv. Find love and kindness. This is Cover Lover Comics Issue 1. That's right, 1. Here's how it goes, folks. This is the origin story. Every good first issue usually has the origin involved. So I'm going to tell you my history, my origin of cover loving and comics in general. So straight out the bat, I'm 43 years old. I've been buy, sell, trade, I guess, comics since I was 9, but started reading those sumbitches when I was about 3 or 4. It's a pretty wild story. My grandmother just was obsessed with making me read. My family wanted me to read. They were obsessed with it. They bought me a phonics machine, which is super boring because back in the day it was like a ticker tape, reel tape machine where you click buttons to answer the questions as you read the book. But I used to just kill this thing. So by the time I hit kindergarten, combined with my phonics machine and comic books, when kids were learning to spell their name and hardly read apple, I was reading We Must Stop Dr. Octopus from Destroying Manhattan. It was pretty hectic. I was reading on a 2nd and 3rd grade level super early, and comics were a huge factor in that because I wanted to know what was going on with Spider-Man. I wanted to know what was going on with these figures and these characters because heck, I was seeing the cartoons, I was seeing the TV shows, I had some of the toys. I wanted more content. And let me tell you, in the early 80s, it was pretty hard to get, more content. Here's how we do it. So we go digging through comic shops, we go to stores, we go to conventions. My parents are going all over the place getting me whatever they can, 7-Eleven, Kmart, wherever. And my dad finds this comic shop in Naples, California. I was about 7 or 8 years old. And there's this old Italian man who owns it. The place was called Pacific Fantasy Comics in Naples, California. And the man's name's Tony Raiola, legend. This guy was ahead of the game, very knowledgeable, and had a lot of connections. However, I started digging through the comics in his store, and he had dollar bins, quarter bins, and he had flyers on his desk. And the flyer that was on his desk was promoting upcoming shows, like locally, Westminster, Bellflower, all over California, but mostly local. I would grab these flyers and go digging through the quarter and dollar bins and find stuff that was going to be done by some of the people, creators and writers coming to those shows. Buy those comics, go there, and I would have my father take a Polaroid picture of the guy signing the comic and me with the guy, and take the picture and put it in the back of the bag and board with the comic, go back to the comic shop and try to trade it to the old man for store credit at 8 years old, 9 years old. So I'm on the way home and my dad says, "Son, the old man's having problems moving some of those heavy boxes and he could really use some help. Would you like to work with him on the weekends?" And man, I was stoked. And I don't know, I just threw it out there to him. I said, "I'll work for comic books, sir, and store credit." And I was super young and I was doing it at the table. My parents encouraged it. And through this fella, I got to go to the Shrine Auditorium from the age of 9 years old, 10 years old, till I was about 16. And I got to meet legends in the industry. Jack Kirby, Jim Steranko, Chris Claremont. I mean, you could just keep naming them. I mean, Sergio Aragones. I mean, icons, man. And was just grateful and overwhelmed. I kept reading comics, collecting comics, all through the 90s boom and the crash of the market. Kept reading them, kept buying them, and flipping them was never really a big thing. It's come into my life and out of my life, I mean, we all fall on hard times. In the early 2000s, I had to flip a collection that I had found, and it was my first big find. I went to a yard sale around the corner from my house as a young man, and there was a lady who had a long box right out front, and it was the first thing I saw. And I went to the lady and I started fingering through the thing, and I asked the lady, I said, "How much do you want for this box? The whole box?" And she says, $50. And I said, "I'll give you $100 if you put it up on the porch and don't let anybody else have any." She says, "Okay," and laughed. And I went home and I had to convince my dad to give me $100 to buy this box of comics. But he already kind of knew what I was trying to do, and he was a hustler, and he was like, "All right." And I said, "I'll give you the money back in 3 days." So we go around the corner and I get this long box and I give the lady $100 and I take it back home. And in this box was effing gold. XMen 1963, 1 through 4, doubles. And then assorted doubles as you started to get all the way into the later issues that were reprints. But inside this box was X-Men #1 from 1963 to X-Men 121. It was ridiculous. It was missing like 2 or 3 issues and just had tons of doubles. And then a bunch of mixed Kazar and weird stuff in it. But I was stoked, man. So I instantly started collecting every bit of X-Men I could. My dad started bringing me graphic novels and just encouraged reading out the ass. And I love comic books for the fact that not only are they a great way to educate kids about morals and justice and how to be a good human being, you know, but they also teach you about art and culture and just all sorts of wild imaginative stuff. Comic books have been a solid part of my life since I was young. My first few comic books that I actually purchased from a comic shop weren't just from Pacific Fantasy Comics. One of the first comics I ever bought was in Yarnell, Arizona, visiting my grandmother. It was on top of a mesa. There was this old liquor store. And I went inside there, and in retrospect, when I look back, I was buying comic books off of a DC spinner rack. And I got Captain Carrot and his Amazing Zoo Crew #1. Once I got that book off a spinner rack and I saw what it was, I was just enthused, and I just bought comic books everywhere. Eventually in 2002, like I said, I had to sell off that huge X-Men collection just to keep going and hustling and surviving. And you know, life can be tough. But see, this is where I learned. See, I love comic books, I do, but they're not meant to be held on for forever. Maybe some, you can be that way, but I mean, they're meant to be shared, read, sold, traded. Express the love you have for your comics. So Cover Lover Comics is all about sharing my love of comics with you. FLAK is all about find, love, and kindness. So ladies and gentlemen, give a subscribe to FLAKtv, give a subscribe to Cover Lover Comics. This has been part 1 of the origin story. We'll see you soon in the funny books.